You know that feeling? It's like uh, your brain knows you're perfectly safe. Right now, you're just sitting there, maybe in your living room. Nothing's actually wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but your body is just like buzzing with panic.
Yeah.
Or your mind is totally convinced danger is right around the corner.
Yeah, or maybe the opposite almost. Like you're absolutely crushing it at work, totally competent, handling really complex projects.
Right.
But then you get home and simple things feel overwhelming. Or maybe just connecting with people feels impossible.
Exactly. How can these seemingly opposite states, these really different ways of being, how can they exist inside the same person?
Yeah.
It's confusing.
It's a profound paradox, isn't it? And while many people who've experienced trauma live with this kind of intense internal conflict,
Hmm.
on the outside they might appear functional, capable, maybe even thriving, but inside, well, different feelings, impulses, even perceptions can feel like they're battling each other. It's incredibly confusing and honestly often leads to this deep, painful sense that something is fundamentally wrong with them.
Exactly. And that feeling, that internal contradiction, that sense of fragmentation, that's really what we're diving into today.
Mm-hmm.
Our source material for this deep dive comes from some really powerful excerpts of Janina Fisher's book, Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors.
It's a great resource.
Yeah, it offers a framework that kind of takes these confusing experiences and makes sense of them, not as a sign of being broken, but as, well, as a logical, maybe even brilliant outcome of surviving overwhelming situations.
That's a great way to put it. And our mission today really is to unpack this specific model. We want to explore why trauma can lead to feeling fragmented inside
Okay.
and what these internal parts are thought to represent. And crucially, how understanding all this opens up entirely new and, frankly, hopeful paths towards healing.
Right. Think of this as maybe a guided journey. Yeah. To grasp a complex but really vital concept in trauma recovery, almost like a shortcut to understanding that internal world after trauma.
Exactly, a shortcut to the landscape inside.
Okay, so let's unpack this core idea then. Fisher's central observation, the one that seems to hit home for so many people, right?
Yeah.
It's that trauma survivors often look integrated from the outside. You know, they hold jobs, have relationships, manage life.
They're functioning, absolutely.
But internally, there's this profound sense of fragmentation. And this shows up as these intense, confusing conflicts, like knowing you're safe but feeling terrified.
Or wanting closeness but pushing people away, feeling fiercely independent one minute and desperately alone the next. These paradoxes.
Yeah. And the model that provides the framework for this,
Hmm?
it's called structural dissociation, right?
That's right. It's a model rooted in neuroscience. It suggests that the personality, particularly when it's faced with overwhelming threat or maybe abandonment, can organize itself into different parts.
Okay, so parts.
Yeah.
But it's not like dissociative identity disorder, not distinct personalities.
No, exactly. It's more like different aspects of the self, the ones that hold specific functions or experiences, become less integrated. They don't communicate as well.
So like different facets of you that don't always feel connected or aligned.
Precisely. And here's the key insight, I think. The one that can truly shift perspective and bring, honestly, immense relief.
Okay.
These different reactions, the overwhelming fear, the sudden anger, the urge to just disappear, or that desperate need to please, they aren't random symptoms. They're not proof that you're inherently flawed or broken. Like, they were logical. They were even necessary survival responses at the time the trauma actually occurred. They are the actions and feelings of different parts of the self that took on specific roles just to get you through.
That link to survival,
Yeah.
that makes so much sense. And the source really highlights the brain and the body's role in all of this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The book touches on brain science, reminds us of concepts like the lateralization of brain function, how the left and right hemispheres tend to specialize.
Right, like that older split brain research showed you could present info to one side and get a reaction, but the other side wouldn't verbally know about it.
Exactly, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the left brain is often described as more verbal, logical, focused on daily tasks, the part that helps you go on with normal life, as Fisher puts it.
Yeah.
It processes the summary, like the gist of things.
Okay.
But the right brain, that's more visual, emotional, focused on implicit memory and survival cues. It remembers experiences, especially traumatic ones,
Yeah.
very accurately, the sensations, the emotions, the images, but often without a clear story or language attached.
So in a dangerous environment, these different brain systems, especially the survival ones, they can kind of take over or get disconnected from the parts needed for everyday life.
Yes. The brain has these really powerful action systems wired for survival, fight, flight, freeze, submit.
Yeah.
And it also has systems for normal life, things like attach, explore, play. In unsafe situations, the ability to quickly shift into survival mode becomes critical.
Makes sense.
And over time, this rapid switching between, say, needing to freeze to survive and then needing to attach to a caregiver, it becomes a form of trauma-related procedural learning.
Like a learned habit, almost automatic.
Exactly. Your brain and body learn danger, okay? Go to this survival setting. It just happens.
And the body holds on to this learning, doesn't it? That phrase, the body keeps the score.
That's right. The source really emphasizes that the body stores these trauma memories implicitly. So not as words or a neat story, but as sensations, images, physiological states.
Like a sudden racing heart or feeling numb or shaking.
Precisely. And this can lead to what's called autonomic dysregulation, where your nervous system gets kind of stuck in overdrive or shutdown mode.
Yeah.
And these body memories, these reactions, they can get triggered in the present even when you're objectively safe. Your body reacts as if the past is happening right now.
Okay, so understanding the brain and body's survival response helps explain why this fragmentation happens. Now let's sort of meet these parts the model talks about. The source introduces the going on with normal life self.
Right. This is the part, or set of parts really, that handles daily responsibilities, work, school, relationships, hobbies, paying the bills, all that.
The functional part.
Exactly. It's the part that uses your intelligence, your creativity, determination, social judgment. Fisher sometimes calls it the host, but not like it's empty or fake. More like the part providing the home base or hospitality for the other parts. It's capable, it's resourceful.
And yet, so many survivors who function really well, they feel like they're faking it, like they have a false self. I hear that a lot.
Yes, and the book clarifies this really well, I think, that functional self is absolutely real. It's just as real and just as evolutionarily necessary as the parts holding the trauma. That feeling of being a pseudo-self, it's actually a consequence of the fragmentation itself. The functional part feels disconnected from the parts holding the deep truth of the trauma experience. And that leads to feeling like a fraud. It's a misunderstanding born out of that split.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, so we have the functional going on with normal life self.
Yeah.
What about the others? The trauma-related parts.
Right. These are the parts that hold those implicit memories we talked about, the intense emotions and the survival responses, the fight, flight, freeze, submit that were necessary back then. They carry the weight of the past.
Can you give us a sense of what those parts might be like based on the source material?
Sure. Fisher describes different types, sort of categories based on their function or feeling. You might have child parts, for instance, that hold intense fear or profound sadness, deep longing for connection, maybe overwhelming shame.
Okay.
Then there are fight parts. These can be driven by anger, aggression, a need to control things, or maybe an impulse to push people away to protect the more vulnerable parts. Flight parts might show up as avoidance, numbing out, maybe using substances, or engaging in behaviors like binging or restricting food. Basically any strategy to escape unbearable feelings or memories.
Makes sense.
There are also submit parts. They cope by complying, maybe feeling a lot of shame and self-blame or experiencing deep depression. And finally, attach parts. These hold that intense yearning for closeness, but often they're coupled with an extreme sensitivity to rejection or abandonment.
Wow. Okay, when you list them like that, it's not hard to see how these parts could be in direct conflict with each other.
Exactly. And this is where that confusing behavior comes from. An attached part might desperately want love and connection.
Yeah.
But a fight part, terrified of getting hurt again, immediately triggers anger or defensiveness, and it pushes away the very person the attached part needs.
Or, like you mentioned earlier, planning a wonderful vacation with your family, seeming totally fine, while simultaneously having intense suicidal thoughts.
Right. Or idealizing someone one moment and then just despising them the next.
Yeah.
Those paradoxes start to make sense when you see them as different parts operating from their own logic, their own survival rules. The functional self plans the trip, while maybe a despairing part holds the deep pain, or a fight part just wants to end the pain and protect against any future hurt.
This constant internal battle,
Yeah.
this feeling of not being whole, it sounds incredibly damaging. What are some of the consequences of this internal alienation?
Well, a major one is self-alienation itself. The functional self often tries to disown or ignore the trauma-related parts. thinking, that's not really me, or I shouldn't feel this way.
Right, pushing it away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that creates immense internal tension. And paradoxically, it diminishes the self-esteem of all the parts, including the functional one. It's like trying to live in a house where you've locked certain residents in the basement. Everyone feels the tension, the lack of cohesion.
And I guess if you're constantly trying to shut down or escape the feelings held by certain parts, you never learn to actually tolerate difficult emotions, do you?
Precisely. This leads to what Fisher and others call affect intolerance, because you automatically shift away from intense feelings. Maybe the functional self just disconnects when a child part feels unbearable, and you don't build the capacity to just be with strong emotions.
So everything feels overwhelming.
Right. As a result, any intense feeling, good or bad, can feel overwhelming, scary, or it might just leave you feeling completely numb, shut down.
And this directly explains why many self-destructive and addictive behaviors might emerge. Behaviors that are so often viewed just as character flaws.
Yes, and this is where the book offers such a compassionate reframe, I think. These behaviors, they aren't moral failings. They are attempts, often driven by fight or flight parts, to regulate unbearable emotions, sensations, or those implicit memories.
Try to cope.
Trying to survive, really. The normal life self might desperately want to stop, but the survival parts are still operating on that old programming. They're convinced that action, whether it's using substances, self-harming, restricting food, isolating, is necessary for immediate survival or relief. The example of Katya in the source is just heartbreaking, but so illuminating. Her suicidal fight parts logic was that by pushing everyone away, she'd protect them from her anticipated self-destruction, and she'd protect herself from the pain of being hurt by them first. It's a survival strategy, however tragic the potential outcome.
Wow. Okay, so if the problem is this internal fragmentation and alienation, what does a different path to healing look like, according to this model?
The goal shifts really dramatically. It's not solely about remembering or analyzing the past trauma itself, though acknowledging it is important.
Okay.
It's more about transforming how those memories and feelings live in the body and mind now. It's about building coherence and collaboration between the parts, overcoming that internal alienation.
So getting them to work together.
Yes. And the source emphasizes that fusion isn't necessary. The parts don't need to become one indistinguishable blob. Connection and cooperation, that's the goal.
And this healing process, it's described as attachment-based.
Yes, but it's about building internal attachment. The idea is that the functional, capable, resourceful adult self learns to become the secure, attuned, compassionate caregiver for the younger, hurt, frightened, or defended parts. The parts that didn't receive that kind of care when they needed it during the trauma.
Like internal reparenting?
Exactly. It's internal reparenting, essentially, providing that secure base inside.
That's a really powerful idea. How do you even begin to do that? It sounds complex.
Well, key skills involve cultivating mindfulness and dual awareness. Mindfulness here is described almost as an act of hospitality towards oneself.
Hospitality.
Yeah, like learning to notice your internal experience, including difficult feelings or body sensations, without being immediately overwhelmed or feeling like you have to act on them right away.
So observing from a bit of a distance rather than being completely consumed by it?
Precisely. And dual awareness allows you to stay connected to the emotional or the somatic experience of a part while simultaneously remaining anchored in your present adult self, knowing where you are, who you are now.
Okay, so you feel the feeling, but you also know you're safe in the present.
Exactly. The medial prefrontal cortex in the brain is thought to help support this observing stance. And the source gives a good example. Sheila's therapist explicitly asking for permission to interrupt if she became dysregulated while talking about trauma,
Right.
emphasizing that staying within her window of tolerance, staying connected to her present self was actually more important than just getting the whole story out in one go.
And that really highlights the focus on the now, doesn't it?
Exactly. While acknowledging the past experience that shaped a part is crucial, validating why a part feels terrified or enraged based on what actually happened, the focus is less on detailed exploration of the trauma narrative itself, which can be really re-traumatizing if not handled carefully. So healing centers on the interaction between the present adult self and the parts in the present moment. It's about bringing the resources and safety of today to the parts that are still stuck feeling like it's yesterday.
Okay, so what are some of the specific therapeutic interventions or ways of thinking that come from this approach? How does it look in practice?
Well, a major one is reframing symptoms. Those confusing, distressing things, feeling suddenly like a frightened child, or involuntary body shaking, those overwhelming shame spirals,
Yeah.
they aren't just random problems to get rid of. They are seen as communications. They're manifestations of a specific part's experience. They're implicit memories or their survival response playing out right now. They're trying to tell you something important about the past.
Like they're speaking in their own language,
Hmm.
a nonverbal language often.
They absolutely are. Which leads to another really crucial technique, using parts language. Learning to say, for instance, a part of me is afraid, instead of just, I am afraid.
Ah, creating that little bit of space.
Exactly. The source says it's like learning a new language for your internal world. It creates that vital bit of distance which allows you to observe the feeling or impulse with curiosity, maybe even compassion, rather than being totally identified with it and swept away.
It takes practice, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. Like
Yeah.
learning any new language. But it's fundamental to creating that space for the adult self to interact differently with the experience.
And once you can see it as a part, maybe it's easier to approach it with, well, with befriending and compassion.
Absolutely. The whole process involves welcoming and accepting these different internal states, or roommates, as Fisher sometimes calls them.
Roommates, I like that.
Yeah, it implies they live with you, you have to find a way to coexist. It's about cultivating genuine curiosity. Why does this part feel this way? And compassion, understanding that even their most difficult actions were born out of attempts to survive. As one client in the book realized about a terrified part, I never thought about why they were so scared. It never occurred to me that they thought they were still in New Jersey where the trauma happened.
Wow, so the part was literally stuck back there in that time and place.
Exactly. Which brings us to another crucial step, bringing parts up to date. Because of what are sometimes called amnestic barriers, like internal walls or dissociative phenomena, parts often don't know that the trauma is over. They don't know they're safe now.
They don't know about the present.
Often no, or they don't know they're part of an adult body now, with adult resources living in a different time and place. The source calls it a kind of trickle-down effect. Information about present safety and resources needs to actively reach these isolated parts.
So the adult self has to actively communicate the reality of the present moment to them.
Precisely. Like the example of Annie reassuring a scared part inside that her house is safe now, that's not like the dangerous home she grew up in. The adult self needs to provide the missing experiences that the parts didn't get during the trauma, things like care, protection, recognition, attunement. The source uses this simple but really powerful metaphor of offering a wing as a gentle, somatic way to offer protection and presence to a vulnerable part. It kind of bypasses language and speaks directly to the body, to the younger parts.
Offering a wing.
Yeah, like Sarah offering a wing to her scared 7-year-old part.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful illustration of that internal gesture of protection and care.
And this develops into an internal dialogue,
Yeah.
like the parenting idea you mentioned.
Yes, it's essentially learning to parent the younger or hurt parts from the inside.
Mm.
The adult self learns to listen to their fears without judgment, to validate their experiences. Of course you're worried given what happened, and then offer reassurance and care from the wisdom and strength of the present. The example of Carl comforting his crying young part by repeating, he never ever has to be alone again because he has you and you have him, just perfectly captures this internal commitment. It's about prioritizing these parts, checking in with them, letting them know they are seen and cared for by the adult self now.
The book also mentions asking parts to step back sometimes. What's that about?
Yes, that's a technique used when a part's emotion or impulse becomes too overwhelming, when it threatens to push the client outside their window of tolerance, making it hard for the adult self to stay present.
Okay.
So you might gently ask the part to maybe sit back a little or turn down the volume just a bit so the adult self can remain present and help manage the situation. It's important, though, to acknowledge that parts might be afraid of being ignored if they step back.
Because maybe that's what happened in the past.
Exactly. It often reflects past experiences of being unseen or having their needs dismissed. So validating that fear, I know you're worried I won't listen, but I need you to step back just a little so I can help. That's part of the process too.
So what's the therapist's role in guiding someone through all of this? It sounds like delicate work.
It is. The therapist acts as an attuned witness, first and foremost, a guide, a coach. They help the client identify the different parts, understand the survival logic behind their actions, and facilitate building that internal communication and attachment. And crucially, the therapist acts as an external regulator. They're constantly monitoring the client's window of tolerance, prioritizing safety and regulation over just, getting the traumatic story out.
Right, like the Sheila example again.
Exactly. A good therapist using this model isn't just passively listening, they are actively helping the client stay grounded in the present adult self while acknowledging the past held by the parts. They help the client build the internal capacity to do this themselves over time.
This whole approach, it feels incredibly validating
Yeah.
and actually quite hopeful.
I think that's precisely why understanding fragmentation in this parts model matters so deeply. It can dramatically reduce self-blame, for one thing.
Yeah.
It provides a clear, logical lens to understand those confusing internal conflicts and seemingly paradoxical behaviors, seeing them not as personal flaws, but as echoes of a survival story. And it offers a concrete, step-by-step roadmap for healing that moves beyond just trying to manage symptoms. It aims for internal connection and coherence.
And importantly, the goal isn't to somehow get rid of parts or merge into one perfect monolithic self, is it?
No, absolutely not. The goal is coherence and collaboration. It's about helping the parts recognize they are part of a larger, capable whole, that the adult self is present and resourceful now, so they can learn to coexist, communicate, and cooperate. And that leads to a feeling of greater integration, greater presence in your life today. It's about feeling more whole, not erasing parts of your history.
So the journey of healing trauma, when you look at it through this lens, is often about recognizing, befriending, and integrating these fragmented aspects of the self, offering them the safety, the understanding, the compassion they needed but didn't receive in the past. It's really a process of internal welcome and repair.
That's beautifully put. Yeah, it's building the secure attachment inside that wasn't available on the outside during those vulnerable times.
And as the source quotes Madeline L'Engle, which feels like a perfect place to reflect, I am still every age that I have been. My past is part of what makes the present and must not be denied or rejected. Maybe just consider that. How acknowledging and befriending the you at every age, especially those younger hurt parts, might transform your experience of the present. What would it feel like to extend genuine hospitality to all the residents within?